Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Late Night Linux Extra, recorded mostly on the 29th of January 2021. I'm Joe, and this episode is recording of the second community meetup that we had. It went really well. We had some great conversations. This is really just a small snippet of it. Thank you everyone who came and took part, and the next one will be on the 26th of February. That's Friday night, again, 10 p.m, same time as usual. Looks like we're going to do these every couple of weeks, but we'll have to see long-term how that works out. There's been some people saying we should maybe change the day of it, so I don't know about that. But yeah, let's just say the 26th of February for the next one. Before we get to that recording, just a thanks to everyone who's supporting us with PayPal and Patreon. It really is appreciated. If you want to join those people, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And remember, for $5 a month or more on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed. So let's just get on with it then. What was a pretty straightforward question turned into a pretty interesting discussion, particularly around WSL, I thought. So let's hear it now. I want you to sell your distro of choice, but I want you to be realistic about why it might not be for everyone. So what's great about the distro that you use and why might it not suit everyone?
Okay, I only know the reason why I chose the one I'm using, which is Manjaro, because at the time I was using the one that resembles Apple.
What, Elementary OS?
Exactly, thank you. Elementary OS. And I was just a pain in the butt of updating it when a new version came out, because there was always trouble. And at that time, I learned for the first time that there existed something in Linux land which was called a rolling release. And just the whole concept of not having to update, but just being update all the time with the latest version was so happy thought that I just went to Manjaro and I used it for that reason alone. There's no reason I can think of anybody not wanting to have the same thing as I do.
It's interesting because for the exact opposite reason, I don't use Manjaro or Arch Linux, which is a couple of years back, I used to use Arch Linux all the time. And then at some point they had some Pacman update, their package manager, and running that update would break something in glibc, which would cause your entire operating system to stop booting. So you could literally grab an ISA from their website, the latest rolling release, do pacman SYU, and your operating system would break immediately. And for that reason, I was kind of against rolling release distros. And my distro is Ubuntu, and I choose it because it just works.
I haven't encountered that. I mean, I've encountered some stuff, but yeah, when that happens, I guess I'll have to rethink my strategy. But that's what happens when you're using computers, doesn't it? There's something always happens at one point in time. But it's been 5 years now, I think, 4 or 5 years. So I've been going along pretty nice.
It may be different these days. They may have matured. It was very... I compare it to like if I grabbed Windows and then ran the update and it just broke and I could consistently do that. That's not really a good operating system experience. And the response from Arch Linux at the time was something along the lines of, well, you should have kept up with the updates on our mailing list. And I was sort of like, I don't want to have to deal with that headache.
Yeah, that line rings a bell. Read the notes before you update. But it's not been like that for at least 2 years or so.
Whereas with Ubuntu, you can just update it every day and not have to worry about breaking changes. That's just never going to happen. You're going to get security updates and bug fixes pretty much only, and it's just going to keep working. And so literally, I have an alias up is, apt-get, update and upgrade, dist upgrade and all of that. And I never even think about it. And it just always works. When you're going from version to version, then there can be some changes and breaks and stuff. But you know that if you get on the LTS, and specifically the Ubuntu LTS, I mean, nothing changes in that ever pretty much. And that's why I like it. That's one of the best things about it.
I guess you could also say that that's one of the reasons someone wouldn't use it. It's kind of stable and maybe boring.
Yeah. Is anyone using any other distros then, like SUSE or whatever?
Linux Mint.
All right. Why do you use Linux Mint then?
I've been using Linux Solvent on and off for about 8 years. To be honest, Mint's the only one I've sort of stayed with. I seem to find it quite a stable, reliable mix with Mint. Probably if you didn't want to use it, if you didn't really like the interface of Windows XP, but to be honest, I didn't mind that.
Yeah, well, Cinnamon out of the box is very Windows-like, isn't it? And for me, that's a good thing. I like the Windows interface. I don't like how Windows is put together and just seemingly held together with gaffer tape and just breaks all the time and opaque updates. And there's a million reasons why I don't like using Windows. But I think that the interface, the basic idea of it, of your taskbar at the bottom and your menu in the bottom left, your clock in the bottom right, and Windows with buttons on the top right, that to me was just the first experience I had of computing. And so, yeah, why change? So I could happily use Cinnamon, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's also that, but also they seem to have done a good job. I mean, from the maintainer's point of view, I think they do quite a good job of the technical decisions on it. They have kept it very consistent over the past couple of years. So, it's more of a distribution I could recommend to anybody really to get into Linux, especially if they're quite used to Windows and quite fixed. Particularly if you've worked with Windows a lot and you've sort of got you've figured out in your mind how things are going to be done.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Datadog, the performance monitoring and analytics solution for real-time visibility into your Linux environment. Combining metrics, traces, and logs in one unified platform allows you to get a bird's-eye view of your entire infrastructure. You can also see any underutilized cloud or on-premises servers via the real-time auto-generated host map. Datadog's machine learning-based alerts eliminate false positives and make sure that you only receive alerts on issues that matter. You can automatically detect unanticipated outliers, anomalies, and errors with Watchdog, the auto-detection engine that surfaces performance problems in your applications without any manual setup or configuration. Start your free Datadog trial today by visiting datadog.com/late-night-Linux. Start your free trial, create one dashboard, and you'll get a free Datadog t-shirt. That's datadog.com/late-night-Linux. So is everyone here either using Ubuntu or an Ubuntu-based distro or an Arch-based distro? Is there no one else using anything else?
I'm a WSL user, I'm afraid.
Interesting. What distro on WSL? Just Ubuntu, or do you use the other distros as well?
No, so I'm pretty new to Linux. I think I've over the years played with it and got frustrated with it getting in the way of trying to do get sort of work done. But with WSL2, just running Ubuntu on that, I sort of feel like you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a very stable Windows experience. And I've heard you, Joe, talk about some of your frustrations, and I'd love to understand that in a bit more, but that feels like quite an entrenched opinion. But certainly having that flexibility and just how much you can get done with Linux, but with that wrap of Windows actually works really well.
Yeah, if you want to use any sort of proprietary stuff, then yeah, like games and all the rest of it, then you've got Windows. Yeah, well, you're an interesting case then. You're this fabled person who isn't going to use Linux properly, but will use WSL. And my understanding is there are millions, literally millions of you. That's really interesting. So you didn't want to stick with Linux. Had you ever tried it properly, or had you only ever just sort of messed about with it?
No, so I'd say that my last attempt was probably 12 months ago, just before the event. I just got a new PC and I thought, okay, it was actually an XPS. I bought an XPS 13 that came with Ubuntu. But where I've got my desk set up with a dock and a couple of 4K monitors, that hardware sort of experience, the hardware stability experience, just where you'd dock and undock and stuff wouldn't come back properly, or it would just crash and you'd have to power off the machine and restart. Just that sort of really fundamental, where you can't trust the basic stability of your system. And maybe I'm asking too much, but at the same time, it shouldn't be like that behavior of being able to plug a laptop into a dock and then undock it and stuff. That's just taken for granted.
And so that works perfectly in Windows then?
For me, it has. I mean, don't get me wrong. That I think when you start mixing, like you need the Dell laptop with the Dell dock, and then you'll have a good experience. But it's more achievable than it is, or it was for me with Ubuntu. But at the same time, I did give that. I think I ran Ubuntu for a good 3 months, and it was all going fine. And I think it was as soon as then I started wanting to do sort of integration with more corporate tools and those proprietary tools, that's when it sort of comes up unstuck a little bit, where you're trying to install stuff which is only available on Windows and things like that. And again, you can run that in VMs and things, but it sort of got to that point where it moved from being a hobby where it's fun to tinker with it to actually being where you've got some crunch time that you need to get something done, and actually it just gets frustrating, and I ended up back on Windows.
Yeah. Why did you buy a machine with Linux on it in the first place then?
Because I wanted it to work. I love the idea of having an Ubuntu desktop, because I love the way it works. I love how tinkerable it is. I love that sort of how many little utilities are around. And it's like listen to your guys' show and listen to Linux Action News and sort of Linux Unplugged and stuff like that. And I love the little picks and things. There's always a little utility that improves your life in some little way that there doesn't seem to be for Windows. There's not that sort of richness, that sort of ecosystem of these just little utilities that are really cool. And actually that got me hooked. And I was like, oh, that's quite fun. I want to make that work. And then it's just sort of under that heavy use case, I think it sort of comes unstuck a little bit for me.
And are you a developer then?
More of a sysadmin. So I would say that my stuff is more sort of managing Windows servers, managing Linux servers as well. I don't profess to be particularly good or experienced at it, but enough to get my head around Docker and get stuff working that way. But yeah, more of a sort of network engineer, infrastructure engineer. And
what advantages do you have with WSL, apart from, proper SSH session and stuff? Like, do you do test deployments locally or whatever?
Yeah, so you sort of using Docker locally. I think it's things like tmux are awesome and really cool, and sort of being able to do that and sort of actually just having the native SSH experience is really cool as well, and also just being able to SCP stuff around, and I guess it's some of those basic utilities that are just bread and butter on Linux that make stuff a lot easier. I mean, Windows hosts have only just got SSH support and stuff like that, so that for us is, in the Windows world, sort of fairly revolutionary. But also it's a lot of little utilities for, I need to convert this file type from this to this. On Windows, you inevitably end up on some dodgy website where it's either wants you to upload a file, or it sort of you want some shareware that wants to install a bit of malware that comes along with it, or whatever, or just some ads or stuff like that. On Linux, there tends to always be the utility you need is an apt get away. That's the kind of thing I love.
Right. Well, you definitely represent a large portion of users of Ubuntu, I think, in that you're using it with WSL. I wonder if you'll ever go to Linux properly. Do you think that this stops you needing to then? Is that the bottom line here?
Yeah, it does. It makes it less of a sort of a contrast between the two, because that sort of line is becoming more merged. But I've also, at work, we can opt for a Mac as well, and that sort of that feels a little bit closer to Linux as well, and with the stability, but also it comes with a lot of, this is Linux, but not really Linux, and a sort of you pay the price premium. Actually, it's not anywhere near as stable as Windows as well. But I think I'm sure I will continue to try out Ubuntu on sort of bare metal and see if I can get it working. And I think as soon as I get to that point of having a setup that is stable, I don't have weird DPI issues, and I sort of like that's a complaint, but at the same time, I sort of, you've got to remember that this is software that's put together by people in their spare time and stuff like that. So you've got to, there's a bit of give and take there.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily fair. I think some of it is put together by people in their spare time, but an awful lot of it is professional as well.
Yeah, that's true. I think I listened to the your last episode earlier today, and I think the way you guys were talking about the BBC Bite Size, and that stuff annoys me, like where that just actually people getting the word out about open source and people using it. That would be awesome. I'd love to see a day where Ubuntu is just as, or not even Ubuntu, but just a Linux distro is as stable, as sort of accessible. And I think that Windows is making that almost easier. You're teasing people into that world. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, well, this is the death of the Linux desktop and it's just going to become Linux lives inside WSL. But I think there's actually a lot of people who now get exposed to that in a way that they weren't before.
I use Solus, and I don't have a glowing book report for you, but it's very stable, always has been, and rolling updates consistently, always getting at least the latest that that the developers are able to give us. And then on top of that, I also kind of enjoy the fact that nothing is sacred. They're always willing to break the mold if they need to. So the deviant in me also appreciates the fact that it's not based on any of the other major distributions. I use the Budgie desktop environment, and I've had really good luck with it. One thing that I could say as far as it not necessarily being available, or rather best for everyone else, is I think it's probably not as tinkery as obviously something like Arch or Manjaro or so on and so forth. That crowd tends to go that way for a very specific reason. And this is a little more of a, dare I say, daily driver, whereas with little less effort.
An EO package is very, very fast, isn't it?
In my experience, yes.
That's the thing that really stands out for me with Solus, is just quite how fast that package manager is compared with DNF or apt or whatever. It just seems to fly.
I know this is kind of a quirky thing too, but my computer shuts down so fast, and I really love that because I can walk away and know that it's not wonder, why in the hell is it hanging for 15 seconds?
Yeah, I get that with Ubuntu sometimes, like a couple of minutes, it just decides to hang and I have no idea what it's doing. But yeah, because most people keep their machines on or sleep their laptop or whatever, whereas my computer is either on or off. I never want it to sleep. I don't want any screensaver, any power saving. Even for laptops, it's either on or off. So that would be nice to be able to, and it boots quickly as well, presumably.
It does.
Yeah, it's a good distro. I don't know if development has slowed in recent years on it, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. But it's been a long time since I checked it out. I should give it another go, I think.
Yeah, you make more than I had Solus as well. But at the same time, I object to the fact that Manjaro is supposed to be a tinkering distribution.
Yeah, I would say Manjaro takes Arch and makes it a little bit more friendly.
Yeah, I mean, Manjaro is just an easy choice for a distribution that just works. That's how I use it. That's how I see it. I mean, I've set up one machine from bare Arch just once, and I wouldn't want to do that again too many times.
I suppose we can chalk my comments up to my inexperience, having never actually fired up Manjaro. So forgive me.
I'm going to go for Solus sometime this weekend just to try it out for you and have my findings next time.
So Solus, when you say it's not based on, I guess it's not based on Debian or Fedora or something, is it? I've never heard of it.
No, it was made completely from scratch.
Does that not make you a bit nervous because there's just less eyes on it?
Not right now, no, because I don't use it for anything that I would consider production necessarily. In my particular use case, I do have another computer that I could lean on if I needed to, if something did completely break. Again, I'm not a developer, but I do speak with the developers occasionally, and I mean, it seems to me like they're pretty competent persons. So I hear your point, though. I really do.
What's that other PC running?
Windows.
Ouch.